I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Teleios. Welcome back to our verse-by-verse study on the book of Luke. We're in chapter 6. Christ is still ministering around Galilee in his first of 3 Galilean tours. Today, Luke gives us the names of the 12 apostles. Now, generally, these are the 12 that are closest to Christ, and they are called in the Gospels themselves the disciples, generally, which means learner, as opposed to apostle means one sent. So these are the ones that Christ is entrusting the word as much as he can teach them at this point that will carry forth the word at the time of the church, beginning in Acts 2 at Christ's ascension. So after his time of healing, he went to the mountain of prayer, and starting in verse 12, and continued all night in prayer to God. So this is the third time we've seen him go to be alone, to perhaps be revitalized on the man part of himself. I look at this, we also saw this in chapter 4, in chapter 5, each time after spending time healing people. I'm sure he needed it and went to fellowship with his Father. And on his day, he called his disciples, and of them he chose 12, whom he also called apostles. So this is about the first time. It's around this time. I'm not sure this is the first time that it's used. I think it is. And about this time in the other synoptic gospels as well. But again, they're really in the role of disciples at this point, learners. Christ protects them, I think, physically and mentally, doing the work for them, takes care of them, their needs. And as apostles, one sent from God, they will lead the early church. And their names, as listed: Simon, and this is Peter; Andrew, his brother; James, and John. Now, these are probably the closest, seem to be the closest to Christ, and especially John, James, and Peter. Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas; James, the son of Alphaeus, so this is second James. James, the brother of John, is more prominent and is often called James the Greater, not in the scripture, but by church tradition. James, son of Alphaeus, is often called James the Lesser, less prominent. Simon, called the Zealot; Judas, the brother of James; and Judas Iscariot, who would betray Christ. All these, by tradition, continued in the ministry afterwards, and not sometimes with a lot of support. We know, of course, that Paul would become the 12th apostle. This is how I look at it, replacing Judas by Christ's direct calling. And he would minister all over the Roman world, and which is detailed in the book of Acts. May have gone to Spain, which is not recorded. And then Peter, we know he ministered in Antioch, and by tradition, there went to Rome afterwards, where he died. And then James the Greater stayed in Jerusalem, in that area where he was martyred early. John, we know that he was on Patmos. He probably, which is an island in Southeast Asia, or Asia Minor, he probably ministered in the Ephesus area and Southeast Asia Minor during his ministry. But again, we don't have a lot of specific details. It's a pretty strong tradition that Thomas went to India and ministered there and was ultimately martyred as well. Of course, Judas Iscariot did nothing at being a traitor to Christ. Okay, so then in verse 17, he came down with them, being the apostles, stood in the plain with a company of his disciples and a great multitude of people of Judea, Jerusalem, and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon. So again, many Jews gathered around him, but you notice here are the Gentiles from Tyre, famous city in what I think is now Lebanon, and Sidon, which was also nearby Tyre. And they came to hear him and be healed. They were vexed with unclean spirits, and they were healed. Verse 19, the multitude sought to touch him. And virtue, and this is the Greek word, the original language of the Bible, dunamis, went out of him. So it seems when people touched him, Christ could feel that energy leave him. We see this also in Matthew 9 and the healing of the bleeding woman. But he healed them all. So you can see the compassion of Christ here. Again, this testifies by prophecy in the Old Testament to his messiahship. It's obviously God's using it to call attention to his message as well as showing his mercy to the people. Okay, so what have we seen here today? We've reviewed the 12 disciples, and Christ is continuing his healing ministry to the Jews, but now also the Gentiles are seeping in and fulfilling again the Old Testament prophecies about Christ ministering to the Gentiles. I think Hosea 1:10, 2:23, Isaiah 11:10, and certainly other verses that mention this. Isaiah 65:1 as well. Okay, thank you for joining me today. We'll continue with his ministry tour next time in sort of a Luke's rendition of the Sermon on the Mount or a similar sermon elsewhere. We'll start that, not near as extensive as in Matthew, but informative nonetheless. Please join me then.